Also joining me now, we have with us New York Times White House reporter Julie Hirschfeld-Davis and former federal prosecutor Shanlon, who previously represented Rick Gates, a former aide to the Trump campaign, and Paul Manafort, who is now cooperating with the Mueller probe. Shanlon, let me start with you. How significant do you think it is that Cohen had this meeting today? And were you President Trump? How worried would you be?
I'd be very worried if I was President Trump, and it's because this is somebody who is right at his side, and we even heard in that little bit of excerpt from the tapes how unguarded Trump was in talking to him, and he's used to letting his hair down, talking freely, musing about things. That's what makes somebody like Cohen so dangerous. He's right there, and they're not planning litigation. They're not planning to defend against an investigation. They're just talking, so he's going to be forthright.
And when your colleagues with the AP sat down with President Trump and asked about Michael Cohen, boy, the hurt feelings are still right there on the surface. President Trump lashing out, still upset.
Absolutely. I mean, we saw this in the immediate aftermath of when Michael Cohen's office was raided by investigators, and we first learned of the extent to which they were going into his office, into his files, into all of the information that he has, which is huge about President Trump's business and personal affairs over the last, more than a decade. And even though he said to the AP yesterday that Michael Cohen lied and that, he really just had a bit part in my business. I mean, we all know that,
right.
This was Donald Trump's legal fixer. He did all manner of things for Donald Trump. And so one of the reasons he's so angry about this is because he knows that Michael Cohen knows a lot of stuff. And he also knows now, given the plea agreement from a couple of months ago, that he's willing to provide some of what he knows to investigators to save himself.
And implicate President Trump in those things. Evan, you also have some new reporting tonight on the state of the Mueller investigation, repeated meetings between his team and Paul Manafort, also about when Mueller might issue his report. What are you hearing?
Well, yeah, so this is supposed to be a quiet period because we're leading up to the midterm elections in November, but behind the scenes, the Mueller team has been very busy. They brought in the Paul Manafort for at least 9 interviews, hours that they've spent with the special counsel's office now getting information from Paul Manafort. We don't know exactly what he's provided, but we know that among the questions he's being asked is about interactions with Russians over the years. And so that goes obviously in addition to the cooperation that we now are seeing from Michael Cohen. We know that the behind-the-scenes talks have intensified between the special counsel's office and the Mueller and the president's legal team. They've now received questions that they're trying to provide written answers to, the take-home test that we always talk about. And then there's people associated with Roger Stone who've come in. They have been subpoenaed. Some of them have been having talks about providing more information, as well as our team that sits at the courthouse has seen multiple interactions between the Mueller team and the judges that oversee the grand jury to try to make sure, whatever testimony they're trying to line up. So we know that there's a ton of activity coming, that this seems to indicate that after the midterms, the Mueller team is going to gear up with additional indictments. We expect that a report will be sent up to Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, perhaps in December. We don't know, obviously, when exactly Mueller will report whatever he has to report, but we're expecting, Jake, at least November and December to be extremely busy.
Just to be clear, 9 meetings between Mueller and Manafort? Nine since his conviction?
Exactly.
What do you make of that? 9 meetings and a pending report possibly after the midterms?
They've got a lot to talk about. And that's the kind of intense interaction you're going to have when you're a cooperator. Right. There's nothing you can hold back. They're going to ask everything you possibly know. I think it's interesting with this much grand jury activity, though, as Evan's pointing out, it seems like they'd be hard-pressed to do a final report even that quickly on that timetable. So it's possible there's going to be more than one report. I mean, I suppose there even could be some sort of an interim report, but it just seems like there's a lot of activity going on to actually finalize something. I think it's a little bit of a victory if the president does not have to submit that interview. I think that's something his legal team has been working very hard to avoid. Absolutely. And so, I mean, that might be a bit of a kudos to them that they avoided that. But of course, Mueller's report is then free to say that the president wouldn't meet with us, so this is what we have. And then the president's free to spin it to say we would have wanted to meet with them, but they weren't reasonable.
And Julie, obviously the president's legal team, Rudy Giuliani included, talking about how much they want this to wrap up. So I guess if they hear that some report's going to be issued after the midterms, they might be happy about it, but then they hear that 9 visits between Manafort and Mueller, that wouldn't fill me with confidence.
Right. I mean, I think they've been eager for this to wrap up as soon as possible for a year, more than a year, and had been telling the president as early as last year at this time that, oh, it's just around the corner, Thanksgiving maybe, and here we are a year later. I think for sure they want this to come to an end, but there are still so many unknowns. I think Evan's right, it's been a quiet period. They've been quieter even than usual on the Mueller team because I think of the approach of the midterms, but that also means that apart from the back and forth that Giuliani and the rest of the legal team are having on the president's actual answers to questions that they're submitting, they don't really know what they're dealing with. And so they're seeing things like that that Manafort is extensively cooperating with the investigation, and they're wondering what more is going to come forth, and also whether it's going to be the final word, whether what we see in November potentially or December is going to be the beginning or the end.
And that's the important part, is that they have no idea what Paul Manafort is saying behind the scenes in those nine interviews.
You remind me of it reminds me of the movie cliche, it's quiet, almost too quiet. That's what they're thinking in the White House. Evan Perez, Julie Davis, Shanlon, thank you so much.